All right. Well, we, have covered kind of, this is the third of three kind of major sections. There's other ways you could divide up the book of Revelation, but, we looked at the first three chapters, the letter to the seven churches, and then last time it was more of a 30,000 foot view of the many symbols and these interludes mixed in, and just kind of, again, trying to look at these things, taking off the lens of a literalist roadmap approach and really trying to hear some of the symbolism that the original audience would have heard. So we're going to continue that on tonight as we cover chapters 17 through 22. And we're especially going to zoom in on this first section, the fall of Babylon, because again, the whole point of this study is this bigger question of how to live as faithful witnesses while living in Babylon. And so we're finally to this character of Babylon, and there's a lot to glean from there. But before we do that, I want to quickly go over the other two sections that you can see in this larger section. In chapter 19, starting in verse 11 through 20, we read about the two judgments and then the 1,000-year millennial reign of Christ. And then in chapters 21 and 22, we read about a new heaven and a new earth. So we kind of see these three steps here with the two judgments. The first judgment, Jesus, of course, is seen riding on a white horse, his robe dipped in blood, with sword coming out of his mouth, which is a reference from Isaiah. And then from there, he judges the evildoers. Then from there, we read about this 1,000-year reign where Satan is bound for 1,000 years. And those who died at the hand of Babylon are risen. And Revelation calls this the first resurrection. And then there's kind of there's the 1,000-year reign, and then Satan is unbound. He deceives the nations. He gathers them for one final battle. However, fire falls from heaven, sends the devil to the lake of fire. And then there's the judgment of the dead. So again, two kind of interpretations there. The more literal one would see like an actual worldwide cosmic battle, as well as a literal 1,000-year reign, and would see these three sequences in order, whereas the symbolic interpretation, like the Bible Project guys pointed out, this could potentially be kind of just two ways of looking at the final judgment. And then that would mean that the millennial reign could be understood both as an assurance of hope for those who might be martyred. So again, we're putting ourselves in the shoes of those seven churches, and it's like, man, I feel like death is really, that's not exactly what I want. But the assurance is no, you're going to overcome, even if you're killed for sticking to your faith. And then some have wondered, could it also be a symbol of Christ or Christians' authority over Satan? That Satan bound points to kind of this reality that Christians have, that we have final authority over Satan. Did you have something there, Mike? Oh, okay. So again, that's just a real quick overview of that, and then we get to new heaven and new earth. Where we see Jerusalem coming down, and there's like these big, it's like a cube, which is supposed to point us to the tabernacle temple. On top of this, there's a direct acknowledgement there's no temple in the city because God dwells there. We read this beautiful hope that there is no more sorrow, pain, or death there. We see a renewed tree of life with its leaves as healing for the branches, which, as a side note, you have 6 pieces of paper tonight. The bottom 3, as I was typing this up, I just happened to remember I had to type up a little thing on the tree of life for one of my classes. And the project was really cool. they had us pick up this book that points out, there's a lot of images for the church. Obviously, some obvious ones like the body of Christ, the vine, a few others. But then there's all these like kind of subtext ones, and so they had us, pick one, and then we had to kind of research about it and write about it and do some theological thinking around it. So that's just bonus material if you're curious. If you're not, no offense taken. All right. I think one pausing point for us that I wanted to ask is, right at the beginning we read, and John says, and then I saw a new heaven and a new earth. And the question is, well, what do we mean by new? Certainly, it could mean, God just recreates, that it genuinely is just a brand new earth. However, there's a few reasons to think that a better word here is maybe renewed. And one of the reasons why it's good to rethink this is, like I said in the first time around, kind of our optimism towards the world and the direction of the world has some effects on our interpretation. I think, unfortunately, sometimes we read Revelation in certain ways, and it can come across like, obviously these graphic images like we talked about last week, that we just assume God's out to destroy the earth and then create a new one. Unfortunately, that's led to some bad theology and practice, because it's given us this view of creation that it really doesn't matter. God's just going to wipe it out anyways. And that kind of flies in the face of our creation mandate in Genesis 1 to tend the earth and keep it, right? So that's worth talking about for a second. But also, there's different Greek words for new, and there's one that clearly means like, brand spanking new. And that's not the new word used here. This one, in other contexts, is used in a more kind of transformational way, like when we're called new creations in Christ. So at least my interpretation is when Jesus returns and makes all things new, it's this very space. Creation matters to God, and He's very much going to come and dwell with us here. Now, the flip side, though, so it's going to be familiar in many ways, but it's also going to be drastically different, obviously, because we don't know how to think of the world without sin, sorrow, and death, right? So exactly. So while I want to emphasize, like, it's not clouds in the sky with babies playing harps image, so it'll be familiar in many ways, but obviously it will also be very, very new and different because it will be different. It will be unlike anything we've ever known or experienced.
Would it go right along with the reversal of the fall?
Yeah. Yep.
Where things that aren't anymore?
Yeah. Yep.
So,
I think that's definitely one of the ideas they're going for here. But people have also pointed out, it started in a garden and it ends in a city. And I think there's an important element there to say that human activity has mattered. And God can use human activity, even broken and fallen activity, and redeem it and restore it. So again, I think in its worst, it's like nothing besides believing in Jesus, nothing in my life matters, or my career or anything like that. Because again, God's just going to burn it away. And I think, no, like, in some way, God could use the engineering systems that you're developing right now and integrate it into His new renewed creation in some way. I don't know how. That's up to God. But I think if everything, all the work we're to do is unto the Lord, I think that's for more than just pastors and missionaries and evangelists. I think that's for all of us. All right. Any other thoughts before we just jump to big bad Babylon here? I think verse 13 gets at exactly that. You know, we've got all these spices, incense, myrrh, frankincense. Like,
On and
people
on
are
and on.
making money left and right. All this commerce, and oh, by the way, slaves.
Oh yeah. And
Human
then the last
lives.
one,
Like,
souls. My
Right.
translation says bodies and souls of men.
yeah.
That was a little bit of a hard turn. there.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's intended to be like, wait, this sounds great. Oh, right. There's this ugly underbelly to it that,
I find it interesting. It's like the city is personified.
Mhm.
The city is a city. It's built by man and everything, but it has personification to it. That the city itself is immoral. But at the same time, all the people working there seem to be doing extremely well. There is that underbelly
yep,
of people who are slaves there,
yep,
but but there's a reference to her, she, her,
yep,
which is an individual, a person. But yet everything's in reference to a city,
yeah,
which
yep.
they don't match.
Yeah. My one initial guess is that, you know, this is clearly Rome. You know, any reader in the Roman Empire is going to know what the great city is. And the goddess of Rome was Roma. So that might be part of what he's getting at by calling her a woman.
Okay,
It
so it's
is-
context again.
Yes. Yep.
It's
Yep.
context again that
Yep.
we don't comprehend.
Right. Yep.
I couldn't help think though with that of Proverbs where it says multiple times in the first chapters of Proverbs there's two women, wisdom calls aloud in the street, she raises her voice in the public squares, at the head of noisy streets she cries out, and then folly, the woman folly is loud, she's undisciplined and without knowledge, she sits at the door of the house, the seat of the highest point in the city, calling out to those who pass by, who go straight. Come in here, she says to those who lack judgment. Stolen water is sweet. Food eaten in secret is delicious. I couldn't help but think of, I mean, it's a very similar analogy in Proverbs, even though it's you know far away from Rome at the time Proverbs was written. And I guess they're not saying the city is that, but you still have these women in the city. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
when I
Yep.
listened to the Bible Project video, the two that we reviewed last time, I couldn't help but think, if you had to guess, this woman on the dragon is probably a pretty attractive woman that's
Yeah.
Mm.
Oh yeah.
drawing everything to her, right?
Yep.
I mean,
Yep. And I think, I think we're touching on something important is just by playing appearance, it's like, this is, this is great. But as we start to zoom in a little bit and maybe peel back some of the layers, we see, well, wait a minute here, this isn't all it's cracked up to be. And that, I think that's exactly what John is trying to get at, as we're going to see more in a minute. So, but he calls the woman and the city Babylon the Great. Now, this is key because it's capping off a really important theme that's developed in the Hebrew Bible, and it's called an archetype. So when an individual or in this case a place becomes kind of a symbol for something bigger. And so this archetype starts, as you pointed out, Pop, in the Tower of Babel in Genesis 11, which I meant to look it up. I forgot to. I don't know why it's translated this way. The literal Hebrew word in the text is Babylon. It's the Tower of Babylon. But for whatever reason, I think it's because there's something with the expression of Babel. We can Google that on our own. But so yeah, we see in this Tower of Babel, humans decide, hey, come, we're going to build this tower, which was probably like a ziggurat, those like step pyramids. And there's a whole, cultural aspect to that. But it's very much, this corporate human arrogance of we can build up to the skies, which is where God is. And the key word here that they highlight is they have this kind of newer technology that enables them to do this, bricks and mortar. And again, if we were to be reading in the Hebrew and then we see that those words come up again, they're like giant blinking lights that should come off the page. And unfortunately, sometimes we lose those in our English translation. So we have this idea, human arrogance, accompanied by human, unfortunately, even God-given creativity used wrongly to develop something. So there's our first seed of Babylon. Then when we get to the Exodus story, of course, the Israelites are now in Egypt, and lo and behold, what are they forced to do? They're forced to build with brick and mortar. So it very quickly, without directly saying it, okay, we've got another Babylon on our hands, this time in the person of Pharaoh and Egypt. There's a new element, though, added, of course. There's forced labor and oppression. So people coerced into doing this, which when you don't have to pay your labor, that's a great way to save some money, right? It's a great way to make a lot of money. And then we also see in Egypt, there's a national arrogance and a military might. I mean, that's really highlighted in the Exodus. There was a reason why those Israelites were terrified, because Pharaoh's armies could just wipe them out, So we keep reading. We get, hey, hooray, Israel has their land. They're called to be the people of God. And Solomon wants to do a really noble thing and build the temple, which was, of course, his dad David's
You're talking
dream.
in just original Torah. You're not walking through 19 or 20 right now, right? Or are you? You're as you're walking through the.
This is just Torah
Yep,
still.
got it,
Yep.
okay.
Yep. So Solomon builds a temple. Yay! But we read in 1 Kings 5, he conscripted labor. Dang it, And then we get this other little hint that things aren't amazing and great. We read that the temple is 90 feet long, 30 feet wide, and 45 feet high. But then the next chapter, Solomon decides to build himself a temple, and it's 150 feet long, 75 feet wide, and 45 feet high. So it's like, well, wait a minute. You're building a place twice as big for yourself as you did for the Lord. And so Solomon, unfortunately, becomes the first of many kings, mostly corrupted kings in the southern kingdom after the split, and then all of the northern kings, as we've read, are corrupt. And then over time, the prophets begin to accuse Israel of something big. You've become Babylon. You've become the very thing that I was called you to not be. And then, of course, when we get to Daniel, the irony is God uses Babylon to judge Israel, who became Babylon. But that doesn't mean Babylon is off the hook, right? Babylon is still this evil. It's the biggest, baddest nation the world has ever seen. They have an ever-expanding empire through military and economic might. And so the important note, remember, the final form of the Bible was composed during and after exile. So that's another reason why not Rome throughout the Bible, but it's because of the people of Israel's very real experience with the real Babylon, so they were able to see previous iterations of Babylon through these other ones. And so that's where the archetype really gets cemented. And so Rome is just yet another example of Babylon. Like the Greeks before them, like the Persians before them, we could go the other way and look at just, Babylons throughout human history. So I wanted just to cover that again. So especially Jews, obviously, who knew their Hebrew scriptures, they know this whole background of Babylon. And so we flip over to the next page, and we start to read some of these characteristics of Babylon that scholars have seen, both from the text, from cultural context. And so one of the authors I've been using highlights 7 of them, 7 characteristics of Babylon. The first is that they're anti-God. There's always some form of idolatry. And like we've talked about for a few weeks now, we like to silo religion away from everything else in life. You can't really do that in the ancient world. So it gets to become this rigorous system that if you don't want to participate in that idolatry, it's going to disrupt a whole lot of things. And then there's many times this deification of the emperor or king. I mean, we see that with the kings of Babylon in Daniel there, we definitely see it with the Caesars in Rome. There's opulence in Babylon, like we read. Luxury, indulgence, entertainment, and games. At Babylon, number 3, it's murderous. There was a common phrase in Rome called Pax Romana, which means the peace of Rome. But of course, the irony there is the only way that peace was maintained was exactly might and murder. They estimate over the centuries, millions died from Roman wars. So we can pretend there was all this Pax Romana all we want, but it came by the means of the very opposite of peace. It was very image driven, inspired awe and wonder from neighboring nations because of their engineering and innovation. And again, we saw that in 18, this beautiful city. It's militaristic. The emperor or king of Babylon is the most powerful man in the world. Really, the armies of Babylon could decimate any opposition. It's economically exploitative, as we highlighted before, forced labor and oppression. And ultimately, Babylon is arrogant. Babylon loves to think of itself as the pinnacle of human civilization. In Rome, there was this perceived golden age that the Romans had finally figured things out and ushered in kind of a new golden age for humanity. And then a different author really wants to zoom in on the role that civil religion plays in Babylon. And he starts by pointing out there's 3 convictions of Rome that Romans held and upheld. That the gods have chosen Rome, that Rome and its emperor are agents of the gods' rule, will, salvation, and presence among human beings, and that Rome manifests the gods' blessing, security, peace, justice, faithfulness, fertility among those who submit to Rome's rule. So again, I think that flows out of a lot of what we just read about, but definitely arrogance, right? Revelation very intentionally brings counter myths of subversive truths to the myths and false claims that Rome and Romans would tell themselves and each other. This is we used the word, I think last time, propaganda. You can very much see here a lot of this was just Roman propaganda to justify their being and way of living. So and not just Revelation, but the gospel authors really tapped into this. So there was a common saying, emperor is Lord. And so for the early Christians to proclaim Jesus is Lord, that's just not a nice title for Jesus. That's in fact a very countercultural claim to make, and a bold one, right? If emperor is this powerful guy, to say anyone else is Lord, that's a good way to get killed. Faith, real quick, the Greek word for faith is pistis, and obviously the word faith in Christian theological history has made a lot of twists and turns. You get to the Reformation, all of that. I like to translate faith as trust, but there's also a loyalty element. So when you say that you have faith in Rome or in the emperor, you're really proclaiming, hey, I have loyalty to Caesar and to Rome. So when we read the New Testament authors saying, keep your faith in Jesus, it's saying keep your trust and keep your loyalty in King Jesus, which again is, for us, maybe it just sounds more like an abstract kind of belief thing. For them, it's a very real. By putting your loyalty in Jesus, you're directly saying you don't put your loyalty in Caesar and Rome. They were all about empire, obviously. So Revelation highlights the empire or kingdom of God. We already talked about Pax Romana, and Revelation points out it's Babylon, the shedder of blood. Yeah, what peace are you bringing here, Rome? there was a Roman god named Victoria, which do you know? I bet you know this, Mike. Do you know what the other name for it is? Nike.
Oh, really?
Yeah, yeah. Nike is the god of victory, which is a brilliant idea if you want to market a shoe company, right? And so again, this self-aggrandizing idea of we are victorious, we have the victory, we hold the victory. So of course we read in Revelation again. You really want to be victorious? You stay on Team Lamb, and you overcome. And then Rome, there another god was this. Was connected with an idea of eternity, and again, this arrogance, like Rome is the eternal city, and Revelation says no, those saints who you killed, they're the ones who are going to experience everlasting life. And then there's one more here that I thought, instead of just on the table, I'd highlight is the good news, the gospel, the Greek word euangelion. That of course we're super familiar with from the Gospels, but here it's a calendar inscription. I believe Cyrene is the place, and we read this: "It seemed good to the Greeks of Asia, in the opinion of the high priest Apollonius of that place, since Providence, which has ordered all things and is deeply interested in our life, has set in most perfect order by giving us Augustus, whom she filled with virtue, that he might benefit mankind, setting him as a savior, both for us and by our descendants, that he might end war and arrange all things. And since he, Caesar, by his appearance, excelled even our anticipations, surpassing all previous benefactors, and not even leaving to posterity any hope of surpassing what he has done. And since the birthday of the god Augustus was the beginning of the good tidings, the gospel, the good news, euangelion, for the world that came by reason of him, which is a result in Smyrna." So it just brings a little context to what the gospel authors, what all the New Testament authors are doing. They are not just making nice-sounding claims, simply making nice-sounding claims about Jesus. They are directly pointing at Rome and the emperor and saying, oh boy, you think that you're the Lord of the earth. You think that your son's birth brings, good news and ends all wars. Well, we've got the Son of God who's the one who truly can and do these things. All right, last little bit here. Civil religion. So this author, Gorman, which I really encourage it. I've got it over there. If you, he's convinced me in a lot of what he lays out. But he highlights kind of three big aspects of civil religion, especially as it pertains to Babylon. One, it's ideology and theology. There is a sacralization, making the state sacred, elevating it to a sacred level. Elevating its power, prosperity, and peace, its activities and accomplishments, especially in expansion and war, in its guiding myths and values, in its past heroes and its current leaders. So this, again, almost this deification of past and present leaders, some of our values, some of the things that makes, in this case, Rome, they're all sacred. They're all holy. They're all approved by the gods.
So you're not saying in this section for religion, like for Christianity to become a civil religion, you're saying these are characteristics of a civil religion.
Of a civil religion, correct. Mm-hmm. Yep, where there's this merger of a faith system and the state. There's also a commitment and a practice. Commitment by the people, or a demand for commitment, and then the people to practice this. A demand of solemn devotion and allegiance to the state as a sacred responsibility, including the willingness to kill and or die for it, to be expressed in public rituals. So I would you would view it as a sacred duty to defend and even die for your country. And then there's a syncretism, which is like a blending of two religions or a religion and something else. It's the reinterpretation of the culture's dominant religious tradition, to incorporate the sacralization of the state and the solemn allegiance to it. It's the mixing of religious faith and practice with political nationalistic claims and practices. So again, I hope we can see when it comes to Rome, I think after going through that, we can see each of those pretty clearly, right? Just this deification of Rome, the emperor, their causes, their values, what they accomplish. It's all integrated into what became known as the empirical cult system. So again, it's right in your face when they have these empirical cults kind of propagating these ideas about Rome. And if you get invited to it, you get invited to participate in it as a Christian, you very quickly have to wrestle, how do I do this and still be faithful to the Lamb? And then this last question that I have is one that we can talk about a little bit tonight, but what is kind of a setup for our last question. It's a difficult but important question. If the people of God, if Israel can become Babylon, you see them kind of caved there, could Christianity become a civil religion for a country? Could even really good notions and ideas, could that kind of have this merging with a national ideal? And if so, how would we live in a place like that? I'm kind of tipping my hand with this question because if we go back over and read these characteristics of Babylon and of civil religion, they sound pretty familiar. Exactly. I think all 7 of those characteristics we could pretty easily attach some modern American expressions and understandings of those things. So yeah, again, I tip my hand there, but next week I want us to really consider, and again, some of this might be even hard to consider, but I would contend, Christianity, and these are broader terms, so obviously it could be probably better nuanced, but I would contend Christianity has become the civil religion in America.
Yeah.
And we, historically,
by name.
Right. And so then I'd encourage us, as with this list of like civil religion and some of expressions, maybe think of some tangible ways that we see that evidenced today. And then that will help us set the stage for, okay, so what does that mean? It's one thing if you're living in the Roman Empire, right? It's easy in some ways, or at least in hindsight, it's easy to see the arrogance of Caesar and Rome versus, Team Lamb. I would contend it becomes way harder when we're all speaking the same Christian language, but it's become this syncretist version. How do we then, as Christians wanting to be faithful and true to Team Lamb, how do we begin to navigate this Babylon that we find ourselves in? So that's what I'd encourage you to think about and pray about. I will warn us, we obviously, if it's the merging of faith and of a religion and state, that inherently means we talk politics, right? As far as a political system, I will encourage us now to even begin to pray and prepare our hearts. That doesn't mean we're going to get into partisan politics and we're going to start arguing, our own political ideals. I'd kind of like us to take it, not get into those weeds. That's for a different time and place.
I guess even though starting to pray through it, I mean, the Catholic Church existed in Rome. I guess my mind goes two places. One, this is nothing new.
Right. Yep. Yep.
If it happened to Israel, if Israel became Babylon, then
We're all in a lot of trouble.
then you know, it would. I would almost. My initial going in position is there's been waves of this, and we started off by saying that for people then, and maybe it's not different now. For people then, you know, you start out pointing out that the culture and the religions and you know things were so interwoven that you couldn't separate, and so I almost. I do need to, one of the things I have that I think is going to be one of my prayer points for me that I have not sorted out yet, almost like, is that bad? And this kind of civil religion, there's an aspect where it can come from a good heart.
Exactly.
Because if I'm going to say, like, if I'm guilty of anything, my probably higher on my list, I don't tend to be someone who goes all in on a political candidate or a political party, or I probably, if anything, I tend to be someone who exhibits some ungodly version of the opposite, where I'm willing to be like, whatever, government is government. I have zero expectations of anything good or beneficial coming from it anyway. Right. And so I have almost, I almost probably separate myself from it, which to your original point, it shouldn't really be possible. That, you know, should that thing be possible? We should be probably driving towards that thing which is unified, but then we probably do it wrong in a lot of ways.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, I guess you know, just as a starting point there, my mind's already saying, well, hold on. The answer probably can't be compartmentalism.
Right. Exactly.
That can't be the answer. We can't become people who are
Just walk away.
Right. Yep.
Isolate, yeah.
because
Exactly.
I would say almost, if you look, there had to be a point, at least we're taught, as Americans in America, we're taught that part of many of the folks that left England to come here was this
Absolutely.
true pursuit of God and religious freedom,
Yeah.
and so maybe there was a true Israel moment that fell back into a Babylon moment. I don't, you know, there's probably been these, if you could label them that, these pure Israel moments in different cultures and different, all over the place,
Yep.
even now.
Yep.
It's interesting that one of the things I think that we observe in our culture around us, and then the term has come and gone a number of times, but secular humanism.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, back in the 60s, the Supreme Court ruled that secular humanism is a religion.
Mm.
And
As defined as like a
those who complain about the entrance of faith and religion into government are speaking from faith and religion basis.
because even secular
It's just a different
humanism is its own,
Yeah,
you know, worldview or
Yeah.
belief structure.
takes faith to believe it. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. So that's what we'll we'll begin by wading through some of those things because you know, it comes to, again, that you hate to say it, propaganda, but what are the myths and the stories we tell ourselves, and many of those can have elements of truth, either be fully true or have elements of truth. But then because it's merged with the state, there's going to be other things included too and added to it. And I think that's one of the beauties, you know, whether we talk about Babylon or so many things of the Bible, it truly is, it's able to address the human condition, even though it does it in a certain time and place, but it's really able to address the human condition about any time and place. Yeah. Because, you know, sure, a lot of things have changed since the Bible is written, but the human condition, the way we choose to act individually and corporately, it's new skins on the same, you know.
Same old wineskins.
Yep, exactly. Yep,
It's old wine in new wineskins.
yep, exactly. And
Not new wine.
yep. And so I think that becomes then part of one, the need for a Messiah, right? We genuinely cannot save ourselves. No new technology is going to do that. No amount of advance in science will do that. Hey, we might benefit a little bit along the way, but still, there's, and I think I said it before. Even the universe eventually, all the stars burn up, and there's no more heat, right? It's just this, or it collapses in on itself or whatever. Like, even from a cosmic perspective, there's no hope except for because of Jesus. And I think that's why they can so boldly say, in the face of another one who proclaims good news and is Lord, like, no, this is where the good news really is at.